Do a lot of planning, preparation, hiring folks. It's always
That's, we go on foods. We got 31 foods. Some of them are. Oh, you get water.
better shape it up.
Yes.
We have.
Oh, I know, you might as well.
Yeah. We have that on 40. Yeah, we're going to do it. I'm not right now.
Some of our refills, we have. Right. We'll see you later.
No harassment. I will make sure to be positive and
Do what?
I'm comfortable with that. I'm not supposed to be here.
How you doing?
Good yourself.
How are you doing?
Okay.
Okay. Everything goes for a long time. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I hear your name all the time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
Well, good idea. There were a couple of things. But I haven't met anyone. Were you, but I never, we never worked together. I worked with Paul and, you know.
Yes. Okay. You said you had lunch. I thought I was I'll be here.
Oh, okay.
Good morning. Well, are you? That's part of my
is.
We presented and left, but I wish I would have stayed.
Whenever you're ready.
And they all want to be back. So,
Let's get it.
Set ready, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is there a copy of it?
There doesn't have to copy, I'm like, hey,
I should.
well, I'm Tracy. If they're on my channel, they're on my channel. Yeah. No, I just,
Oh, good. Nice seeing you. You got 17, 18 people in that office. Yeah, I don't know. I was getting, I got a check today. I got more today. Okay. Yeah, that was good.
exaggerating your trees.
I know
We're going to get started because we know you're busy people and we appreciate you and want to value your time. So if you would find your places and we'll get started. That was kind of opening day, a couple activities I need to do, and then I'll move out of the way and have Ms. Owaldi come up and introduce our speakers and presenters for today. We feel like we've got a good program for you today concerning, as you know, the governor went into the session this year focused on school safety, particularly after dealing with Santa Fe, and I don't blame you. You know, that was devastating, and we never want to see that happen again. But let me open up by saying welcome. Thank you for coming out. We have enjoyed working with you this year. You know, you've successfully closed out one school year, and now you're starting to gear up for the next school year. And I think this program today will help you with that gearing up process and kind of get you thinking advantageously of how this legislation can be operationalized. That's always the devil's in the details, right? And so you got to figure out how we operationalize this. Secondly, let me go over our safety protocol here. Of course, we do not have drills scheduled for the day to test our emergency alert system. So if you hear alarm, take it seriously. We have exits here in the back of this room that goes out to a hallway. At the end of that hallway is a stairwell. Do not use the elevators if you hear an alarm go off. Of course, we have this exit. You can go to the right and take the stairwells that are right in front of the elevator. Then you'd like to go down to the ground floor, across to the gated parking lot, and assemble there. We'll grab the sign-in sheet and make sure everybody's present and accounted for. Okay, on a personal note, guys, I am going to be leaving the department here before the summer is out to pursue some other professional opportunities that I'm presented with. But I want you to know how much I have enjoyed working with you as colleagues, as professionals, and it has been a joy to see our growth as a division, and you helped me with that growth because you gave me good feedback. And I think this year, you know, we tried to take it to another level. But when I got my Medicare information, I knew it was probably time. I knew it was probably time, so I celebrated a 65th birthday here a couple of weeks ago, and it's time for me to step aside and let others come in and take it to another level. And I want to do some things. I want to travel and slow my roll down a little bit and just enjoy the fruits of my labor. So thank you for being just great colleagues, and I can't express to you enough how much I appreciate your commitment to the children and to your staff to have safe learning and teaching environments for them. You know, you guys are awesome, and you helped us to grow, and the feedback that you gave us, we have definitely taken advantage of it, and I hope you saw some of that put into play this year with some of the services and things that we tried to do. So with that being said, Ms. Owaldi, I'm going to move out of the way that you come up and introduce our distinguished speaker today. And Sarah, thank you for volunteering to do this, and I looked at her presentation, I think it's going to be excellent. Hey, welcome. Good morning. I'm going to get some material.
Do you need a driver?
Johnny, Mr. Murphy. I might tell you what, I was walking in the neighborhood, and it takes me longer to recover now. But enjoy your day. We've got a hot lunch coming later on, so please stay with me.
First, I want to give Mr. Murley a hand for everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
He gave me no indication So we appreciate you all coming out. We think we have a wonderful agenda to move through today. A lot of information to cover, possibly. You have that agenda in there. And the first thing we're going to have is our partner Sarah from the law firm to really go through what has been happening in the legislature. But then we also want to always allow time for you guys to share with each other on things that happen throughout the year. And we have a lot of things going on with hazards in our area. So we're going to have two of our districts share with us. Well, one of our districts, Dr. Kay, had an emergency, and so she's not going to be able to be here today. So Mr. Harold is here to share with you. And then, of course, we're going to bring bread together. Because that's the biggest part of this organization, is to know how to come together, to provide resources, to provide support, to try to get information out to you, and we're going to get each other more than ever with the new stuff that's coming out. Before I get Sarah started, I told her that I looked at her presentation and I need to do something moment. And also, this is a big part of the bill about taking care of our kids. And if we're taking care of kids, we got to make sure we're taking care of staff. And if we're taking care of staff, we got to take care of ourselves. So this is the little iceberg that we begin with, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to go through it. That we talk to is campuses now, being very mindful of taking some time, taking a breath before you set it. This year has been very busy. I don't know about anybody else, but it seems like the year flew by. And still there was a lot to do. So we're going to take a moment. Actually, it's 2 minutes, 58 seconds. To do mindful breathing and give you instructions.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
give to kids in order to create a calm environment so we don't have so much triggering off in the school. It takes practice. It takes you out of the rush, and it sometimes doesn't seem perfect, but it is very, very perfect. And I'm going to turn it over to Sushi. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, laying from the wall. Sorry. And she's going to enlighten us.
Very good. Thank you so much, Janice, and you guys will lead that for the amount of material we're about to cover. I'm Sarah Lingua. I'm a partner in the Houston office of, we're speaking of deep breathing, Karcheski, Bradshaw, Spalding, Nichols, Latham, Lingua. For obvious reasons, we go by KBS Law Group for short, because nobody can say Karcheski or Lingua. We have 4 offices, one here in Houston, Beaumont, Nacogdoches, and Austin. As I said, I'm here in the Houston area, but I'm rarely in my office because I represent Texas school districts, junior colleges, and charter schools across the state of Texas. And that's what our entire practice focuses on. All 20 of us who are lawyers there focus on representing public school districts and junior colleges in Texas. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I come from a family of educators. My mom taught for 18 years and was in administration for another 18 years in the same public school district in South Louisiana that I attended. My sister now teaches there. But quite frankly, I didn't have the patience. And so I am the first lawyer in my family, and after I married my husband, which we met 20 years ago this year, I figured out that Langlois means the tongue of law in French. I thought, how fitting is that? So we have a lot to cover today. My associate who put the presentation together came to me and said there's so much that was passed this session, and so there's more than 130 slides. She said, I know you only have an hour, so you're going to have to cut some. And I said, I don't want to cut anything because I wanted you to have the information to be able to take back to your district and go through, including knowing which bills were passed that affect school safety, and there were quite a number of them. So we'll get through what we can get through during the next hour. Forgive me if I go quickly over some of them, but again, I wanted you to still have the information there for you.
That is good. The clicker working. Technology's in the room.
Good. In the meantime, we'll do the old-fashioned way. So this is a quote from the governor's inaugural address. The state must invest more in public education, improve third-grade reading scores, pay teachers more, reduce recapture, make our schools safer, and prepare students for college or career. We know that there was a huge legislative focus this session on education in general, including school finance, as well as school safety, mainly triggering from the Santa Fe tragedy. It's working great. The governor laid out 6 emergency items at the State of the State address. 5 of the 6, and arguably 6 of the 6 affect school districts in some way. And the big 3 were school finance reform, teacher pay, school safety, followed by mental health, property tax relief, and disaster response. In terms of the dates, the 86th session ended May 27th. I'm going to mispronounce this, even though my best efforts at Google Translate. Sindia is the last day of the regular session. South Louisiana, they didn't teach Latin. We majored in Cajun. So June 16th, which had just passed, was the governor's deadline to either sign or to veto bills. And August 26th is the effective dates for bills that did not include an effective date within them. The majority of the bills that we're going to talk about today did include a specific effective date in them, and the whole Texas must act now to make our schools safer. So just a summary of the key events leading up to this session. Many of these I'm sure you already know. May 18th, 2018 was the Santa Fe tragedy where 10 were killed and 13 were wounded. On May 22nd, Governor Abbott held the first in a series of roundtable discussions concerning school safety. May 30th is when the School and Firearm Safety Action Plan was released. And then on February 5th is when the school safety was named as an emergency action item for this session. as a result of Santa Fe, both representatives from the Santa Fe area, Representative Greg Bonin and Senator Larry Taylor, who I'm sure you guys know is the chair of the Senate Education Committee, filed school safety bills, including Senate Bill 11, which is the majority of what we'll talk about today. Senate Bill 11 is a massive bill, more than 50 pages, if you were to pull it. It does address a number of areas, including increased funding for school safety measures. This is a video in the interest of time about signing Senate Bill 11. A tweet from Governor Abbott about signing the school safety laws and trying to make our state schools safer. Okay, getting into the nuts and bolts. Senate Bill 11 provides in terms of funding. Senate Bill 11 provides for a school safety allotment and requires an annual allotment in accordance with an average daily attendance to be used specifically for improving school safety and security, including costs for securing school facilities, providing security for districts, training and planning, and suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention programs. This authorizes a school district to use funds allocated under this section for equipment or for software that's used for school safety and security purpose, as well as an instructional purpose, and again requires the commissioner from specifically appropriated funds to provide to each school district an allotment for school safety. In terms of securing school facilities, it's things that you would normally think about. You can use those funds for improvements to school infrastructure, physical barriers, or the purchase and maintenance of security cameras and equipment, and other technology to facilitate communications and information sharing. With regard to providing security for districts, you can use this allotment for employing district police officers, private security officers, and school marshals, as well as assigning school resource officers through memorandums of understanding. In terms of school safety and security training and planning, and you'll see many of these bills, especially Senate Bill 11, have a huge training component attached to it. You can use these funds for active shooter and emergency response training, prevention and treatment programs, and the prevention, identification, and management of emergencies and threats, including mental health personnel and support, behavioral health sciences services, and developing threat reporting systems. Senate Bill 11 also amends an existing provision of the Texas Education Code regarding bonds. It specifically says that now you can use and issue bonds for retrofitting school buses with emergency, safety, or security equipment, and the purchase and retrofitting of vehicles to be used for emergency, safety, or security purposes. So if your districts are going out for bonds, you can now include money specifically for these purposes. Moving on from funding, our next topic is facility standards.
Sure.
Yes.
This may be outdated, but this may be outdated. You know what we funding allocation. I heard it started and last article around $9.52.
I don't know the exact dollar amount, David. I don't know the exact
No,
dollar.
I'm certain we'll all be finding out.
Sure.
That has a huge impact.
It absolutely
on
does.
those
Yeah,
50
yeah.
students.
Right. Right, right.
Okay,
And I think
I'm
that it
sorry.
also says, yeah, so the bill, in terms of the allotment, in addition to providing funding, it says that a school district that's required to take action under Chapter 41, so if you're a Chapter 41 district, to reduce its wealth per student, is entitled to a credit in the amount of the allotment to which the district is to receive, as provided by the appropriation. So if you are a Chapter 41 district, it's making up for that by providing a credit as well. But in terms of what's the average dollar amount, I'm not sure. That's a really good
So I
question.
didn't know if you've been following.
No, I mean, I have been, but I click each even number of year, these rules and regulations. With regards to portable buildings, not later than January 1st, 2020, the Texas School Safety Center must develop a list of best practices to ensure the safety of students who are receiving instruction in portable buildings and provide information regarding best practices to districts who are using portable buildings for instruction, which many of you are. This next topic is a huge one, policies and training. So Senate Bill 11 amends an existing provision of the Texas Education Code, and you'll see the Texas School Safety Center is now going to have lots of increased responsibility under not only Senate Bill 11, but the other bills that were passed by the legislature. So previously, the Education Code said that the center had to maintain a registry as an informational resource for school districts, and specifically said that the inclusion of a person or an entity in the registry was not an indication of that individual's qualifications. Now, it's the opposite. Now the Texas CSSS must confirm a person's qualifications and ability to provide school safety and security consulting services before adding the person to the registry. So whereas before, anybody who applied was just on this list, now it's an actual verification process that the Texas SCC must go through in order to evaluate the person's qualifications to provide this type of training. Trauma-informed care policy. The trauma-informed care policy must be included in a district's improvement plan and must address use of TEA-developed resources, methods for increasing staff and parent awareness of trauma-informed care, and what are the available counseling options for students who are affected by brief trauma. There's also a training component with regards to trauma-informed care, and the training must be provided through a program selected from the list of recommended best practice-based programs and research-based practices. And during any new employee education for all new district educators and to existing educators at a schedule to be adopted by TEA by rule. Additionally, there's a record keeping and reporting requirement for the trauma-informed care training. Each district must maintain a record of each staff member who participated in this training and must annually report that information to TEA, including the number of staff who completed the training, the number of staff who are employed in the district, and a list of other things that's included in that reporting requirement. There are several amendments to the existing education code provisions regarding school safety training. This one requires the commissioner to provide a waiver permitting fewer minutes of operation by the commissioner. More policy and training requirements. This is from a different bill. This is House Bill 2195, and this specifically adds new policy and training requirements for active shooter emergencies. This is one that's already in effect. It was effective as of June 14th. With regards to the policy requirement, now districts must have a policy for responding to an active shooter emergency, and that must be included in the EOP. Community resources may be used to help develop the plan. There's also a training requirement. School district peace officers or SROs must complete training approved by TCOL. More training requirements for sexual abuse, human trafficking, and other maltreatment of children. This is a combination of two bills, House Bills 403 and 111. And the training requirements, interestingly here, are imposed on basically anybody connected to the school district. Board of trustees, superintendents, and public school employees, as well as a policy requirement that's included in House Bill 111. So there's new trustee training requirements. The State Board of Education must require a trustee to complete every 2 years at least a minimum of 4 hours of training. 3 hours have to be evaluating student academic performance, and 1 hour must be training on identifying and reporting potential victims of sexual abuse, human trafficking, and other maltreatment of children. And it must be research-based and designed to support the oversight role of the Board of Trustees as outlined in existing Texas Education Chapter 11. With regard regards to the trustee training requirements, Board of Trustee candidates can complete the training up to 1 year before the candidate is elected. New trustees must complete the training within 120 days of election or appointment, and returning trustees must complete the training by the second anniversary of their previous completion of the training requirement. House Bill 403 imposes requirements for superintendents. It adds training related to identifying and reporting potential victims of sexual abuse, human trafficking, and other maltreatment of children to the CE requirements for superintendents. This new training is at least 2.5 hours every 5 years. But there is a note that a superintendent subject to the CE requirements immediately before the September 1st effective date are not required to comply with the above for any of the continuing education requirements periods that ends before January 1st, 2020. So they're gradually implementing the training requirements for superintendents. House Bill 111 addresses policy and training for employees, addressing these same categories. It reenacts and amends an existing provision of the Texas Education Code. This one begins with the 2019-2020 school year, so we have days now to adopt these training requirements and as well as a policy. It's applicable to both school districts and to open enrollment charter schools. So what must the policy include? Policy addressing sexual abuse, sex trafficking, and other maltreatment of children must be included in the district improvement plan and any student or parent handbook. I know many districts are in the process right now of drafting or revising their student parent handbooks for the coming school year. This bill, as I said, does apply for this next school year, so this component will need to be added. This allows for collaboration with local law enforcement as well as outside consultants who have expertise in these areas to create the policy and to create a referral protocol for high-risk students. The policy has to address 3 main categories of information. Methods for increasing staff, student, and parent awareness using resources adopted by TEA or the Commissioner, including resources that are developed under Chapter 38. Actions child victims should take to obtain assistance and intervention, as well as available counseling. House Bill 111 also has a training component for employees. Employee training now must include prevention techniques for recognition of sexual abuse, sex trafficking, and all other maltreatment of children, including those areas for children with significant cognitive disabilities. And that's the new provision that was added. This is applicable to all new employees and to existing employees on a schedule that's adopted by TEA rule until all employees have completed that training. The training has to include, at a minimum, the factors that are listed here, factors indicating a child is at risk for sexual abuse, sex trafficking, or other maltreatment, internal procedures for seeking assistance for a child who's at risk, techniques for reducing a child's risk, as well as community organizations with relevant resources in order to help those kids who are at risk. This is what happens when you have 130 slides. You have to break it up. Our next topic is online safety and security. And so in this area, Senate Bill 820 addresses cybersecurity. It's effective September 1st, 2019, and adds a provision to the Texas Education Code requiring each district to adopt a cybersecurity policy to secure district cyber infrastructure against cyber attacks and other cybersecurity incidents, and to determine cybersecurity risk and implement mitigation planning. The policy expressly cannot conflict with the information security standards for institutions of higher ed that are adopted by DRI under the applicable provisions of the government code. Also brand new, and I have a feeling this is probably going to be some of the people sitting in this room, the districts are now required to designate a cybersecurity coordinator, and this is the responsibility of the superintendent. The cybersecurity coordinator has numerous responsibilities, including being the liaison between the district and TEA in cybersecurity matters. be required to send TEA reports of any cyber attack or other cybersecurity incident against the district that constitutes a breach of the system as soon as practicable, and is required to provide notice to a parent of a student who's enrolled in the district of an attack or incident involving the student's information. So if it's not you, my best guess is that you're going to recommend that the district's technology officer take on this role. That's where you go, not it, right? Senate Bill 11 also addresses cyberbullying, and this provides that SBOE by rule must require each district to incorporate instruction in digital citizenship into the district's curriculum, including information regarding the potential criminal consequences of cyberbullying. There are specific definitions included in Senate Bill 11. It is what you would think it is. Cyberbullying, of course, is very broadly defined. As you can see there, bullying that's done through the use of any electronic communication device. And then there's also a definition for digital citizenship as well. There's a big piece of both Senate Bill 11 and other bills that we'll go over that specifically deal with law enforcement. So first, House Bill 3187 eliminates the cap on the allowable number of school marshals. Formerly, you'll recall the maximum allowed was the greater of 1 marshal per 200 students in average daily attendance, or for each campus, 1 per building of the campus at which students regularly receive classroom instruction. Now, the Board of Trustees is allowed, as well as the Board of a private school, to appoint just 1 or more school marshals per campus. So that pre-existing cap has been eliminated. The goal was to provide an additional option for preventing school shooters, provide faster response in shooting emergencies, and to dissuade shooters from increased presence on campus. The role of school marshals is largely unchanged. As you know, the role is strictly limited to the prevention of homicide or serious bodily injury on school premises. It does not reduce those stringent training requirements. Those are still in place. And this applies, again, beginning with this coming school year of 2019-2020. Senate Bill 1707 discusses the duties of school district peace officers, resource SROs, and and security personnel. This one's already in effect. It's effective June 2nd of this year. The author's statement specifically says, as the threat of violent incidents on campus has come to the forefront, many schools choose to utilize one of several types of security personnel to keep their students safe. Current law provides school districts the ability to commission their own peace officers, enter into a memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement to place officers in schools, or hire other security personnel. However, there's little clarity about what these officers are required to do outside of emergency situations, and they often wind up participating in routine disciplinary procedures, a practice which tends to escalate such encounters unnecessarily. This practice is especially dangerous for students of color and students with special needs, who are most likely to be targeted for intervention by a school law enforcement officer. As security personnel become more prevalent in schools and continue to lack specific guidance on their duties, more and more students will face unnecessary contact with these officers and with the justice system for minor disciplinary infractions. Senate Bill 1707 clarifies the duties of on-campus law enforcement, which do not include routine discipline enforcement, by requiring each district that employs such personnel to develop a policy outlining the duties and expectations of district peace officers, SROs, and other security personnel. To ensure such duties complement existing student discipline practices, the bill requires the policy to be adopted with the input from the campus behavior coordinator and any other relevant district employees who deal with student behavioral issues. So once again, more policy is required to be adopted. It specifically must include protecting the safety and welfare of any person in the jurisdiction of the security personnel, as well as the property of the district. The bill specifically says you may not assign or require routine student discipline or school administrative tasks in contact with students unrelated to the prescribed duties. Informal conduct is permissible if it's unrelated to the assigned duties of the officer or security personnel or an incident involving student behavior or law enforcement. What are now the statutorily prescribed duties? Well, when determining these duties, the board must coordinate, again, with the district campus behavior coordinators and just other district employees to ensure that these security personnel are only tasked with duties related to law enforcement intervention and not behavioral or administrative duties that are addressed by other district employees. The duties must be included in the district improvement plan, in the student code of conduct, any MOU providing for an SRO, and any other campus or district document describing the role of peace officers, SROs, or security personnel in the district. So very broad. We want everybody to be aware of what these duties are because there's a requirement to placement in all of these different areas. Senate Bill 11 also includes training as well as a policy requirement for school district police officers and SROs by amending existing provisions of the Texas Education Code as well as the Occupations Code. So previously, the training was applicable to districts with an enrollment of 30,000 or more with school district peace officers or SROs. Now, all districts with school district peace officers or SROs must adopt a policy requiring completion of the education and training program that's required by that provision of the Occupations Code, which requires TCOL to require a school district peace officer or SRO to complete training within 180 days of the officer's commission or the SRO's placement at a school district. And that training must consist of at least 16 hours of training.
There's section 20, default page 20.
Oh, and TCOL made 20. Thank you so much, Chief Franklin.
Chief looked at the team and then.
Oh, right. Okay, awesome. Very good. Thanks for that clarification. Senate Bill 2135 discusses arrested students. So the existing requirements are outlined in the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and states that law enforcement officers must provide the superintendent with an oral and written notice upon a student's arrest for certain offenses, and they must have enough information so that the superintendent can determine whether there's a reasonable belief that the student committed a felony, and requires all pertinent details of the conduct. The Texas Education Code allows for the removal of the student to a disciplinary alternative education placement program if the superintendent has determined, not the superintendent, that's a big typo, right? If the superintendent has determined that the student has committed certain offenses and the student's continued presence in the regular classroom threatens the safety of other students or teachers or will be detrimental to the educational process. What's new is that now sufficient information to allow the school to prepare a safety plan or conduct a threat assessment for the student or determine whether a threat assessment is necessary is now required in addition to the existing oral and written notice requirements. There's also, Senate Bill 2135 also addresses access to law enforcement records and amends a Texas Family Code provision. Previously, that provision said that only a child's law enforcement records could be inspected or copied by juvenile justice agencies, criminal justice agencies, the child, or the child's parent or guardian. Now that access is expanded. When conducting a threat assessment or preparing a safety plan for a child, now superintendents, directors of open enrollment charter schools, as well as CEOs of private schools are permitted access to those law enforcement records. Our next topic for the school safety bills is teams and committees. So we've dealt with policy, lots of training requirements, and now there's going to be requirements for various teams and committees that are subject to school safety legislation. These can be broken up into two big categories. The first, school safety and security committees, and the second, threat assessment and safe and supportive school teams. So first, Senate Bill 11 addresses school safety and security committees. And by amending existing provision, Chapter 37, pertaining to school safety and security committees, basically in 4 ways. It changes the composition of the committee, increases responsibilities of the committee, increases the meeting frequency, as well as now these committees are going to be subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act. So first of all, with regards to composition, these committees must include, to the greatest extent possible, all of the individuals who are listed here. You can see this is a pretty big list, including the board president, board member, another member of the board, superintendent, designees, parents of enrolled students. They want to really have a plethora and a broad range of representatives across our school district communities. In terms of responsibilities, these committees are now have additional responsibilities. They have periodic recommendations to the board and to administrators regarding updating the district's multi-hazard BOP that's already required in accordance with best practices identified by TEA, Texas SCC, or a person included in the registry that we talked about earlier, and consultations with local law enforcement agencies on ways to increase law enforcement presence near district campuses. In terms of frequency of meetings, generally they must meet at least once during each academic semester and at least once during the summer, but a committee established by a district that operates schools on a year-round basis or in accordance with another alternative schedule must meet at least 3 times during each calendar year with an interval of at least 2 months between each meeting. Finally, the School Safety and Security Committee is now subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act, which is Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. Importantly, they're expressly allowed to meet in executive session as provided by the Open Meetings Act. And as you know, there's a specific exception in the Open Meetings Act that permits executive session discussions for safety and security measures. So I have a feeling that this committee will be meeting under that exception quite a bit. The notice of these committee meetings have to be posted in the same manner as notice of board meetings, which that means at least 72 hours in advance and must be posted physically at the administration building, as well as if your district maintains a website, it has to be posted on the website as well.
What type of minutes?
What type of minutes?
Recordings of meetings.
And so that's a good question in terms. Minutes, I think, are just going to be minutes under the open meeting. So you either have to do a recording or you have to do minutes. Same thing with the executive session. You either have to do a certified agenda or a recording. I typically advise certified agenda. In terms of the broadcasting requirement, though, that's a good question of whether or not, if your district is already triggered by the broadcasting requirement, my guess is that those would have to be broadcast as well.
So we're going to have to broadcast going to executive session.
Well, and that's the other thing, is when I first read this, I'm like, well, why? Because this committee is going to be dealing with what? As the name implies, safety and security. And so you're right, I think the vast majority of these are going to be, you'll open up in an open session and you'll go, okay, now we're going into executive session under Texas Government Code section 551 point, whatever the safety and security one is. So I'm not sure what at the end of the day, how much discussions is actually going to take place in open session, but we shall see. Senate Bill 11 also addresses the threat assessment and safe and supportive school program and team by adding a new provision of the Texas Education Code that requires TEA coordination with the Texas SCC to adopt rules to establish a safe and supportive school program. This also requires the Board of Trustees to establish a threat assessment and safe and supportive school team to serve each campus. TEA is required, again in coordination with the Texas SCC, to adopt rules to establish a safe and supportive school program. They are supposed to be developing model policies and procedures. They must incorporate research-based best practices for school safety, including providing for all of the things listed here, physical and psychological safety, multi-phase and multi-hazard approach to prevention, mitigation, preparedness, etc., and multidisciplinary, multi-agency collaboration to assess risks and threats in schools. With regard to these teams, the Board of Trustees of each school district is required to establish policies and procedures that must be consistent with the model policies and procedures that are going to be developed by TEA in consultation with the Texas SCC. Must include procedures when appropriate for the referral of a student to a local mental health authority or healthcare provider for evaluation or treatment, referral to a special education evaluation team, and also anonymous reporting by students or school personnel of dangerous, violent, or unlawful activity that occurs or is threatened to occur on school property or that relates to a student or to school personnel. The policies and procedures also must require each team to complete training that's provided by the Texas SCC or an approved vendor or a regional ESC regarding evidence-based threat assessment programs, and there's a reporting requirement of the team's activities to TEA. The superintendent is charged to ensure that members who are appointed to the team have experience in counseling, behavior management, mental health and substance abuse, classroom instruction, special education, school administration, school safety and security, emergency management, and law enforcement. It's going to be a big team. A team may serve more than one campus of a district, provided that each district campus is assigned a team. So it could be the same team, but every campus has to be assigned a team. There's also an optional oversight committee component. The superintendent may, but is not required, to establish a committee or assign to a committee the duty to oversee the operations of teams established for the district. A committee with oversight responsibility must include members with expertise in HR, education, special ed, counseling, behavior management, school administration, mental health and substance abuse, school safety and security, emergency management, as well as law enforcement. What are the responsibilities of these teams? First, to conduct threat assessments in the appropriate circumstances, to provide guidance to students and school employees on recognizing harmful, threatening, or violent behavior that may pose a threat to the community, school, or individual. And finally, to support implementation of multi-hazard EOPs. With regards to harmful, threatening, or violent behavior, it's a definition that's included there that it could result in specific interventions, including mental health, ISS, out-of-school suspension, or the student's expulsion, or removal to a DAEP or JJAP. Concerning threat assessments, the team is now going to be responsible for assessing and reporting individuals who make threats of violence or exhibit harmful, threatening, or violent behavior, as well as gathering and analyzing data to determine the level of risk and appropriate intervention, including referring a student for mental health assessment and implementing an escalation procedure, if appropriate, that's based on the team's assessment. There are restrictions in terms of mental health care services. A team may not provide a mental health care service to a student who's under 18 years of age unless the team obtains written consent from the parent or a person who's standing in parental relation to the student before providing that mental health care service. This consent that's required must be on a form that's developed by the district that complies with all applicable state and federal laws, and the student's parent or person who's standing in parental relation to the student may give consent for a student to receive ongoing services, or they can limit consent to one or more services provided on a single occasion. The school teams also have reporting obligations, including serious risk of violence, suicide risk, tobacco, drugs, and alcohol, as well as reporting requirements to TEA. On a determination that a student or another individual poses a serious risk of violence, either to themselves or to others, the team must immediately report the determination to the superintendent. If the individual is a student, the superintendent must immediately attempt to inform the parent or the person who's standing in relation to the parent of the event or the concern. The requirements of this, though, do not prevent an employee of the school from acting immediately to prevent an imminent threat or respond to an emergency. Similarly, a team identifying a student at risk of suicide must act in accordance with the district's suicide prevention program. If the student at risk of suicide also makes a threat of violence to others, the team must conduct a threat assessment in addition to the actions taken in accordance with the district's suicide prevention program. With regard to tobacco, drugs, and alcohol reporting, a team identifying a student using or possessing tobacco, drugs, or alcohol must act in accordance with district policies and procedures that are related to substance use prevention and intervention. And then finally, with regards to TEA reporting, the team must report to TEA in accordance with guidelines that are going to be developed by the agency, this litany of information regarding the team's activities and other information for each school district campus that the team serves. And it is a long list: the occupation of each person, the number of threats, and a description of the type of threat, the outcome of each assessment, any disciplinary action taken, any action taken by law enforcement, any referral to counseling, mental health, the total number disaggregated by student gender, race, and status of receiving special education services, being at risk to drop out, and foster care, law enforcement information like citations and arrest, incidents of use of restraint, referrals. The list, it's a very long list. So these teams are going to be responsible for a lot of reporting information in addition to providing the actual services and referrals. Okay. Our next topic, multi-hazard EOPs. Senate Bill 11 amends the existing provision with regards to updating EOP requirements. This is going to be applicable to school districts and to junior colleges. The plans must now address prevention along with existing requirements to address mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, as specifically defined by the Texas School Safety Center in conjunction with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and the Commissioner of Higher Ed as applicable. So the EOP requirements are expanded to specifically now include an emphasis on substitute teachers. And the emphasis on including substitute teachers in these safety measures is a direct response of the Santa Fe incident because, as you know, among the ones who were injured was a former Santa Fe ISD substitute teacher who was shot twice in the legs. And in the House committee hearing on Senate Bill 11, she testified that she was unable to lock the classroom door, which allowed the shooter in, and she couldn't dial 911 from the classroom. And then another substitute had to set off a fire alarm to alert the campus because they were unaware of what the EOP measures were in the event of an emergency. So you'll see, you'll see that the EOP requirements are greatly expanded here, again, with an emphasis on substitute teachers. In the interest of time, I'll leave this for your perusal, but just be aware that now you'll see all this new language. There are many, many new provisions for the EOP. There's also new provisions for the safety and security audits that are already required, that are part of Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code. We know that they're required at least every 3 years. Now, to the extent possible, they have to adhere to the safety and security audit procedures that are established by the Texas SSC, or a person who's included in the registry, that we talked about earlier. And additionally, as part of this audit, now the district has to certify the use of the funds that's provided through the school safety allotment. So that's going to be a new provision of the audit. Additionally, the results must be reported to the Board of Trustees and to the Texas SSC. The report must be signed. This is a new requirement. The report now must be signed by the district's Board of Trustees and the superintendent, or for a junior college, the president of the junior college. This is a new requirement. Upon receipt of a notice of noncompliance under Chapter 37, a public hearing must be held, notifying the public of the district's failure to submit or correct deficiencies in a multi-hazard EOP, or report of the results of a safety and security audit to the Texas SCC, the dates of noncompliance, and the names of each board member and the superintendent during the period of noncompliance, nothing like specifically calling individuals out. The above information must be provided to each person who attends the hearing, must provide members of the public a reasonable opportunity to appear before the board and speak on the issue, so it's a true public hearing, and must provide written confirmation to Texas SCC that the hearing was held. With regards to noncompliance, this is another, when I read this, I went, whoa. Upon notice from the Texas SCC of a district's failure to submit a multi-hazard EOP, this new provision authorizes the commissioner to appoint a conservator for the district, and the commissioner may appoint a board of managers to oversee the district's operations if it fails to comply with the conservator's order. So you know what that means? That means your elected board of trustees gets plucked out, and a new board of managers who's appointed by the commissioner is put in place. These are huge, huge sanctions. In terms of review of the audit results, in addition to a review of the district's multi-hazard EOP, the center may require a district to submit its plan for immediate review if the district's audit results indicate that the district is not complying with applicable standards. If the district fails to report the results of the audit, the center must provide the district with written notice that the district has failed to report its audit results, must immediately submit that report. If 6 months after the date of the initial notification that's required, the district still has not reported the results of the audit, then the center shall notify TEA and the district of the district's requirement to conduct a public hearing that we talked about earlier. With regards to review and verification of the EOP, this adds a new provision to Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code that says that the center shall establish a random or need-based cycle for the center's review and verification of school district and junior college multi-hazard EOPs. The cycle must provide for each district's plan to be reviewed at regular intervals as determined by the center. And the school district and public junior college must submit its EOP to the center on request of the center and in accordance with the review cycle that's going to be established by the center. As part of the review of the plan, Texas SCC must verify that the plan meets the requirements of Chapter 37 or provide the district with written notice that describes the plan's deficiencies and a statement that the district must correct those deficiencies and resubmit the revised plan to the center. If the district fails to submit its EOP, then the center must provide written notice of that fact and may approve a district EOP that has deficiencies if the district submits a revised plan that the center determines will correct those deficiencies. If 3 months after the date of the initial notification of a plan's deficiencies, the district still fails to submit a plan, and the district has not corrected the plan deficiencies, then the centers must provide written notice to both the district and TEA of those failures. And if the district still has not completed the plan deficiencies or submitted a plan after 6 months, then you have to hold one of those nasty public hearings. Our next topic, and it's a big one, and I'll speak quickly, is mental health. And as we said earlier, Mr. Hurley started out with, mental health was a big component of addressing school safety. There's many of the hearings discussed, of course we want to fortify our campuses and our districts from a physical perspective, but they're recognizing that in many of these situations, mental health and awareness of mental health could be used to prevent these situations from happening. So in terms of mental health and school safety, we're really talking about 3 categories of information: mental health resources, mental health consortium, as well as training and instruction components. So first, with regards to Senate Bill 11, Texas Education Code Chapter 29 now requires each school district that's offering K-12 instruction to offer an enrichment curriculum that specifically includes mental health as well as suicide prevention. There's a rubric to identify resources. This part of Senate Bill 11 requires TEA no later than December 1st of this year to develop a rubric for use by ESCs in identifying resources related to student mental health that are available to schools in their respective regions, and requires TEA to develop the rubric in conjunction with all of the institutions that are listed there. The new provision requires TEA's rubric to provide for the identification of resources that specifically relate to training and technical assistance, school-based programs, community-based programs, communities and schools, school-based mental health providers, as well as public and private funding sources that are available to address student mental health. And requires TEA no later than December 1st of each odd-numbered year to review and to update as necessary the rubric and provide that updated information to the ESCs. In turn, the ESCs are required to use the rubric developed to identify resources related to student mental health available to schools in the center's regions, including evidence-based and promising programs and best practices that address all of the things that are listed there. In addition to these ESC-based rubrics, TEA is also required to develop a list of statewide resources that are available to districts to address the mental health of students, again, including all of the things that are listed, same type things, training and technical assistance, school-based programs, community-based programs, etc. With regard to mental health resources, TEA is required to develop a statewide plan to ensure all students have access to adequate mental health resources. TEA is also required to use the statewide plan for student mental health to develop and revise TEA's long-term strategic plan, and they have to provide reports to the legislature. TEA, in addition to any other information that's required to be reported to the legislature, no later now than November 1st of each even number year, TEA must provide a description of any changes that TEA has made to the rubric that's required that we just talked about of mental health resources, and an analysis of each region's progress toward meeting TEA's goals that are going to be developed under Chapter 38. Senate Bill 11 also establishes the Texas Child Mental Health Consortium by adding Texas Education Code in 113.0051. The establishment and the purpose is to utilize the expertise and capacity capacity of health-related institutions of higher ed within the consortium to address urgent mental health challenges and improve the state's mental health care system for children and adolescents, and to enhance the state's ability to address mental health care needs. So with regards to the composition of this new consortium, there's a 13 specific health-related institutions of higher ed, HCSSS, the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, 3 nonprofits who are focused on mental health care, which are going to be determined by a majority of the 13 health-related institutions of higher ed, and any other entity that's deemed necessary by the executive committee. In terms of access to care, this new provision requires the consortium to establish a network of comprehensive child psychiatry access centers, and requires the consortium to establish or expand telemedicine or telehealth programs for identifying and assessing behavioral health needs and providing access to mental health care services. It authorizes a health-related institution of higher ed that's specifically listed, one of those 13, to enter into an MOU with a community health care provider to establish a center or establish or expand a program, and requires the consortium to leverage the resources of a hospital system if the hospital system provides consultation services and training opportunities for pediatricians and primary care providers, and has an existing telemedicine or telehealth program already in place. In terms of consent for services, you may provide mental health care services to a child who's younger than 18 through a program that's established only with the written consent of the parent or legal guardian of the child. The consortium must develop and post on its website a model form to be used in order to obtain that parental consent. House Bill 18 also addresses mental health in public schools. This one's going to be effective December 31st of this year. There's some definitions that are there that I'll leave for your perusal, including mental health condition, as well as substance abuse. More training requirements imposed. This one's going to be for teachers. There's continuing education requirements for classroom teachers, must now include instruction regarding educating diverse student populations, including all of the specific areas listed there, how mental health conditions, including grief and trauma, affect student learning and behavior, and how evidence-based, grief-informed, and trauma-informed strategies support the academic success of students affected by grief and by trauma. Specific requirements for principals as well. This amends an existing provision of the Education Code and says that CE requirements for principals must now also include instruction regarding effective implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program, mental health programs addressing a mental health condition, same thing as teachers educating diverse student populations, and the last two are the same as the teacher ones as well. House Bill 18 further addresses CE requirements for counselors. And now those CE requirements have to include instruction specifically regarding counseling students concerning mental health conditions and substance abuse, as well as effective implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program. And finally, just general staff development training must now include training on suicide prevention, recognizing signs of mental health conditions and substance abuse, strategies for establishing and maintaining positive relationships among students, again focusing on this grief and trauma, how that affects student learning, and preventing, identifying, responding to, and reporting incidents of bullying. This training must use a best practice-based program that's recommended by Health and Human Services in coordination with TEA. House Bill 18, with regard to the comprehensive school counseling program, requires a school counselor to work in collaboration with faculty, staff, students, and parents to plan, implement, and evaluate a comprehensive school conforms to the most recent edition of the Texas model for comprehensive school counseling programs developed by the Texas Counseling Association. And amends the education code listed there to say, before implementing the program, an annual review of the program is required for parents as well as for guardians. Each district is now required to publish all of this information, both in your student handbook as well as on your website, specifically addressing a statement of policies and procedures to promote the physical health as well as the mental health of students. And what information is available, contact information for mental health care providers as well as essential public health services. In terms of curriculum requirements, now we're required for an enrichment curriculum for K-12 students to include mental health, including instruction about mental health conditions, substance abuse, skills to manage emotions, establishing and maintaining positive relationships, and responsible decision making. Some more curriculum requirements. SBOE is required to adopt TEKS that address science, risk factors, causes, dangers, consequences, signs, symptoms, and treatment of substance abuse, including illegal drugs, abuse of prescription drugs, alcohol, such as binge drinking, etc. In terms of contracting authority, districts are now allowed to employ or to contract with one or more non-physician mental health professionals, including the ones who are listed there, in order to provide some of these new mental health requirements. There's new requirements for school-based health centers. On the recommendation of a SHAC or on the initiative of the Board of Trustees or the governing body of a charter school, the school district may establish a school-based health center. Previously, under the old law, the only way that you could establish one of these is if the SHAC recommended it. Now this expands that power to allow the Board of Trustees to make that determination as well. It also amends Chapter 38 to expand the permissible categories of services to now specifically include treatment for mental health conditions as well as treatment for substance abuse. With regard to referral for mental health services, if it's determined that a student is in need of a referral for either physical health services or mental health services, the staff of the school-based health center must notify the person whose consent is required under Chapter 38, verbally and in writing on the basis of the referral. And the referral cannot be provided unless the person provides written consent for the specific type of service for each treatment or for a course of treatment. And finally, wrapping up, because that was not enough, just some miscellaneous bills. Senate Bill 11 also requires parental notification of a bomb threat or a terroristic threat relating to a campus or other district facility at which students are present as soon as possible. A new provision of the Texas Education Code was added to require the commissioner, in consultation with the state fire marshal and the Texas SEC, to adopt rules providing procedures for evaluating and securing school property during an emergency, and designating the number of mandatory school drills per semester. So those are some new requirements. With regards to handgun storage, this is going to apply this coming school year with 1920. A school district or charter cannot prohibit a licensed handgun carrier from transporting or storing a handgun, firearm, or ammunition in a locked private car in a parking area provided by the district, and may not regulate the manner in which those things, the firearms or ammo is stored in the vehicle, so long as it's not in plain view. The concern that this was sought to address was that some districts were implementing additional regulations for storage of firearms and ammunition in locked vehicles. So now you cannot have, if you do have those additional regulations, those are no more. House Bill 4342 says that the Texas School Safety Center Board of Directors must now also include a professional architect, as well as 3 members of the public, which is an increase from 2. It also requires the governor to appoint the new members no later than February 1st of 2020. These members are appointed by the governor with an appointment subject to confirmation by the Senate. Senate Bill 435 amends a section of Chapter 28 of the Texas Education Code and says the duties of a local SHAC now include recommending appropriate curriculum for instruction specifically regarding opioid addiction and abuse and methods of administering an opioid antagonist. Concussion oversight teams, House Bill 961. This amends concussion protocol provisions to now specifically add school nurses may serve on the team at his or her request. It also provides, similarly expands that a school nurse can now immediately remove it from play in practice or competition following a concussion. The nurse must complete a training course at least every 2 years in order to serve on the concussion oversight team. House Bill 496 is already effective, is effective as of June 15th. This adds a new section to Chapter 38. Chapter 38, 37 and 38 are now going to be changed. There's a 2-part requirement. Traumatic injury response protocol as well as bleeding control stations. With regards to the traumatic injury response protocol, each district and charter school must develop and annually make available protocol for employees and volunteers to follow in the event of a traumatic injury that's now must address all of those things that are listed there, specifically including bleeding control, as well as bleeding control stations, which must be chosen by the School Safety and Security Committee or the governing body of charter schools. They must be easily accessible and may be the location where automatic external defibrillators are stored. These bleeding control stations have to have these stated components, all of the ones that are listed here. And they may have the optional components that are also included in House Bill 496. And with that, we actually got through it all. We're just a little over. But are there any questions? I know a lot of information. Hopefully you found this useful and you're able to take the slides back to your district and say, okay, now who's going to be responsible for developing all of these policies and all of these trainings? Who's going to be on these committees and these teams? So I know that you guys will work together. I'm hopeful that TASB Policy Services will take on the immense task of developing some optional drafts of the policies. Hopefully they'll do that quickly, considering many of these bills are either already in effect or going to be specifically in effect for this coming school year. So,
and everybody, on the reminder that we sent out yesterday, these slides were attached. We can resend it if you don't think you got it, but everything that you presented, you received a copy of, and we can resend it to make sure you got it.
Please feel free to share. As you can imagine, this took a while to put together. So the more the merrier in terms of its usefulness. Sure.
The handguns in parking lot are in cars. Did that specifically say employees or does that mean licensed?
Any license.
So it could be an 18-year-old student.
Theoretically. Oh, sure. So his question was in terms of the license, the new requirement in terms of restrictions of having firearms and ammunition in a locked private vehicle. Was that specific in terms of categories of individuals? My knowledge is not. It's just a licensed handgun owner. So theoretically, it could be an 18-year-old student. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing, handguns in large areas. School, or are we, is that expanding employees of other departments? The school district, like transportation, maintenance operations.
So this is a private locked car. So you can, so if it's a district-owned vehicle, you absolutely can, because it's your vehicle, can impose restrictions on that. this applies to privately owned vehicles. So my vehicle parked in the parking lot downstairs, but not the HCDE vans.
Well, no, the term says school parking areas, so is it
Right.
for a school only, or does it cover?
Oh, I think it's just district owned property.
Right, there, school parking.
That's her writing, not the law.
Yeah, that's just the general, but that's a good clarification question. Thank you guys so much for having me today. I'll shoot the messenger.
Okay, so there's a lot. There's a lot. We're looking at how to synthesize this and get information. And there was more details. Everybody's going to be perusing through this and trying to go through and get and send out information that makes sense, that can be consolidated to some points, some areas, but there's a lot of detail. As Mr. Burley said before, the devil is in the detail on it. And we're going to be working with it. We have stepped out on threat assessment. We are putting together a safety forum in October where we're teaming up with the Harris County Sheriff's Office and some other facilities to try to get our arms around a lot of these things. But threat assessment is going to be huge as far as the way that it has to be. The policy piece of it is going to be huge. And so we're looking at bringing a lot to bear in that arm as far as working with understanding the security audit, how that affects your workload and your time on how to get all that done. So there's things that we're going to be conversations with the Technical Safety Center are in the works.
I have a question for Sarah. Anything about school design, Sarah?
School design?
Yes.
Yes. So that's at the very beginning of the presentation. If you go back, there is going to now be an increased requirements. TDA is going to have to specifically add to.
So the district have to provide a plan to the TDA, or how does it work?
No, I didn't see that, but they're going to be adding to the existing requirements that are included in the administrative code. That new requirements to specifically address school safety.
So it's mandate by law that the district must have, because I can tell you that many new school design is wide open, perhaps. So the statement that say, hey, District A, B, C, D, I want a plan, is that in the
So
pipeline?
there's
or
not a
how
review
does it-
requirement.
So there's no requirement?
So there's no requirement for you to submit your plans to TEA for approval. What's now going to be included is TEA is going to include in the existing provisions new requirements that specifically address.
I understand that, but the district have to provide that information to the state? You can write it up, but the district's not compliant, doesn't mean. You get what I'm talking about.
I do. So there's no policing requirement there. I mean, I know when I draft construction contracts for my district, I always include the requirement that the architect must design the plans to comport with the requirements that are included by TA, which now will include security.
So it's a kind of baseline.
But there's no policing in terms of
Vague.
submitting the plans to TEA for prior.
Thank you.
Can you imagine how long the construction project would take? That's a good question.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Sarah before she gets out for the next meeting?
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you. We're going to adjust a little bit and have you get your lunch and then come back and then I'll set Mr. Garland.
It was suggested we might take a quick photo op before you get your lunch and take a break. Could we gather, let's see, real quickly and just take a photo op so that we can publicize this meeting and show all the shining faces. So why don't we go up to the front here and gather for a quick photo op, and then we'll let you take a break, get your lunch, come sit down, and then we're going to have our practitioner's corner with Mr. Harold and Deer Park. And so please come up to the front here, and we'll take it quickly.
Question I want to get to. Steve,
Yeah, Steve, please.
a lot of things that are open there and no solution.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you a hard time. I cannot believe I hear so much about them all the time. Did you take my picture?
Yes, sure.
up front there, and Gene,
I'm short enough. I think you know.
Well, that's me.
Okay, you got it, Keyshawn?
I'm glad you know.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I got it.
Okay. Now you can hold up, you can take a break and grab something to eat.
He said it.
Yeah, we don't have to reinvest it.
Oh, I got it.
Well, that's a
Just checking out
all
ice.
of this is before the school year. So they gotta be busy on something.
Hey, Janice, open that pie for me. You know that those pies on the end? You probably need to cut it up.
Yeah, depending on what donor. Because they need it again, and I told them, I was like, I could do $30 in one day. I could do $30 in 4 days. Yeah, so wait a minute. They need my dealership says they're partnering with me. I need your car tomorrow too, so just keep the road.
Are they just charging you 10?
30, because it's 20 for the insurance and 10 for the parking. So he said if you, I'll take off the insurance and I'll take off the $10 and then just have to dragging you. So he said I can keep the Explorer at the cheaper rate. You don't have to come in and sign the waiver.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I know. She said, go home, Drew.
So that's on there.
To get her out of here.
You still?
We'll do it. Say it again. It'll be on the shared drive.
It's not on
Apply. Well, in real public schools, yeah. You talking about, you mean like a private facility? Are they considered private, charter, or what? How they classify?
But now,
The information, I would certainly try to implement it. I wouldn't, I'd rather err on the side of caution. I would, I'm getting to the course.
I need like smaller plates too.
Oh, do you? Oh, he's getting that. Let's get something, I can get some for you. Yeah, we need some.
You do know that he's off with you for a second, right?
Yeah.
You do know that he's.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye-bye. So we need to forward
There are some.
Been doing good this summer.
So busy, I need to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. Gotcha. Get them out of the way. We got both. And that's we're working on it. We got you covered. No, no, sir.
Well, talking to you,
No, sir. No problem. Yes, sir. I'm here to get this quote. Let's see what it is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. From a administrative standpoint, let me ask you a favor of you. When we send out the meeting invites, if you'll go ahead and accept it for us, it will help us be very accurate on lunch count and that kind of thing. So going forward, we send out a meeting invite, and just go ahead and accept it, and that'll help us with our lunch count and everything
She had 14, but I'm so happy to see y'all exceed our expectation. I'm always going to be happy about that, as opposed to the other. But to help us with meal preparation and other things of that, to accommodate you, please go ahead and when you get the meeting invite, just accept it. What else I want to say to you? Of course, with all the stuff that came out today, Sarah did a great job digging in the weeds for that. Some of those I hadn't picked up, but there's a lot. I didn't realize the amount of legislation that they churned out this year, which is really good for our legislators, so they're to be complimented. The key is going to be operationalizing it as with anything. How do I, one district has 18,000 employees, and then you're talking about training subs as well. So as usual, the logistical part of it is always where we run into some challenges, but what I like is that you've always risen to the occasion and get it done. Somehow you guys managed to get it done. Following the presentation, I always like to bring the practitioner's corner, and Mr. Harold is here with us today, who experienced the ITC refinery fire and all of the implications and gyrations they had to go through in their district. After you lunch a little bit and settle down, he'll come up and share with you how they managed that whole situation and lessons learned from that whole experience. Dr. Kay from Crosby was coming, but her dad was having a procedure today and she needed to be with dad, and so she will not be coming out on the program, but I'm sure Mr. Harold and his experiences with the ITC refinery fire will be very insightful for you. But so take your time, finish eating, and then we'll pick up with that right after you finish eating and get back settled. So don't feel like you have to rush, Mr. Harold. Okay, okay. Is anyone opposed to a working lunch? No, sir, Mr. Harold, you got a green light.
I told them they needed it. I said, no, we're busy.
I wanted to thank Mr. Burns again. I was actually upset with him because when I volunteered to do this, I forgot that it was summer and I felt compelled to wear a tie, which kind of violates summer dress code. But I did put on a tie today, and I see that most of you are following that summer dress code, and I envy you in that regard. But I am Stephen Harold, I am from Deer Park ISD, and we did experience the ITC fire. We tried to do our best to not let people call it the Deer Park fire. We wanted to make sure who set the fire, and who was responsible for it, but it was the ITC fire. And I want you to kind of see, this is the first thing we were faced with on that Sunday. You have to remember that we were just coming off of spring break. We had just completed spring break, and this was on that Sunday prior to school starting. And I want you to notice a couple things about this fire. This is a picture facing to the north, and you can see that the wind was coming out of the southeast. So fortunately for us, the wind was blowing everything to the west. Unfortunate for our friends in Sheldon and Galena Park, they may actually be better presenters of this than I did, because they probably face more of the smoke and more of those issues than really people to the south, like us in Deer Park or even the port, had to deal with. But Deer Park is a community of about 33,000 people, not real large. We have about 12,500 students. And when people were either going into church or coming out of church or waking up on a leisure Sunday morning, that's what we were faced with. And that was in the neighborhood of about 11:20, 11:30. In that particular tank farm there were 15 tanks. And wouldn't you know it, the one that was on fire was right in the middle of those 15 tanks. So that was what kind of we were dealing with on that day. If you can remember too, the media certainly covered that. And the first few days, the smoke plume was just really going straight up. It was very high in the air, and then it would travel to the west. It was not very impactful. Certainly wasn't impactful for Deer Park. Our boundary goes right up to 225. And 225 runs east and west up and down the Ship Channel corridor. And we are not unaccustomed to shelter-in-place experiences. We typically have one every year. They last an hour, 2 hours. It's something that has kind of left the site of one of the refineries, but we are not unaccustomed to shelter-in-place situations. But this certainly was a different situation. And one of the positives about those tanks was this, is that when I was over at the Emergency Operations Center, they told me that the tanks had a floating lid. I don't know if they ever really discussed that too much on the news media, but the lids floated as the product fluctuated. So they weren't under pressure, which is a good thing because there wasn't a high risk of explosion. But certainly they had to let all that product burn out or get it pumped out. But that was, like I said, that was a Sunday day. I particularly like this picture because, too far, because you can see in the background on that one tank it says nobody gets hurt. We were fortunate, and that is unfortunate for Deer Park or for the ITC facility, because the lady that was probably going to talk in Crosby and Kimco, that was not the case there. I know there's some individuals lost their lives out in that explosion. But fortunately, in this tank fire, none of the responders were hurt, and we were very appreciative of that. I know they were too. That was a big issue there. Let's see here. So here's kind of a little timeline of how things occurred for us. Like I said, this was Sunday morning in the neighborhood of 11:20. What was interesting is they closed down the entire 225 section there, preventing people from going up and down 225. That is a major corridor for that ship channel. For them to do that, that was pretty serious. Finally, at 4:30, and that took a pretty good while. You're looking at nearly 5 hours there for ITC to finally have a statement, for them to finally release a statement and to let us kind of know what was the chemical burning, what was the hazards to the community. And the chemicals were naphtha, there was one called gas, one called toluene. All of those were components of gasoline that were burning. Fortunately, like I said, the smoke plume was going straight up in the air. And at that time, they were starting to deploy all of these air quality monitoring stations. And we were all dependent upon the county to do that, or even ITC. And not long after that, if you watch the news media, ITC was not very quick about letting us know what the air quality was. So the city of Deer Park actually employed their own air quality monitors so that we would have immediate access to that information. You're not dependent upon ITC to do that for us. So that was kind of what we were faced with. And then at 8:30 in the evening, there were still multiple tanks on fire. If I had to do over again, one of the things we probably should have done, we ended up canceling school for Monday. We did that Monday morning early at like 5:30. In hindsight, probably would have been better to go ahead and done it Monday evening, but we still canceled school Monday. We did that in accordance with some of our friends in LaPorte. Mr. Clausen's here. They actually have 2 of their schools, LaPorte ISD, that are in the city limits of Deer Park. It's always nice to have a partner in crime, so to speak. When you're canceling school or not canceling school, strength in numbers. You don't want to be the Lone Ranger when it comes to that. So make sure that you have those communication lines open with your friends in your neighboring school district so that those superintendents can visit and can discuss what is the best course of action. I promise you one of the best things that's happened, in my opinion, recently is that Region 4 has started to, Ms. Pam Wells has done these conference calls when we have weather-related events or events like this. And it does, I've sat in on or listened to quite a few of those, and that is very, very important when you're making that decision whether you're going to cancel school or not. You don't want to be out there by yourself choosing to do that when other folks around you are not, I can promise you. It does certainly help in that respect. The same could be said when you have these kind of events. Our superintendent, probably, I don't know how many times I've talked to the mayor, how many times I'll talk to the emergency management coordinator, have those relationships. Those are so important prior to these events. You don't want to have to be trying to develop a relationship with your emergency management coordinator for the city when this starts. You want to make sure you have those relationships built prior to these kinds of occurrences happening in your district. That certainly would be one lesson that I would very much reiterate to all of you that you work towards that. In the 40 years when I was talking to our superintendent grew up in Deer Park, and he's worked for 40 years in Deer Park, and he said the other day that he could never remember that we actually canceled school the entire day for a shelter-in-place event, for any kind of, and that's probably, saying something in Deer Park, because like I said, we're right there on the cusp of industry. But we have had certainly shelters that last a couple hours, but we've never canceled school before in the 40 years that he can recall, and I certainly appreciate that. But once again, we canceled school on that Monday morning, and so then Tuesday rolled around, okay, or Monday, we got through Monday, school was canceled, and then as we got through Monday towards the evening, all of the weather was still, all of the wind was still pushing everything to the west. Really was no impact to the city of Deer Park or to our schools. So we made a decision Monday evening or Tuesday morning to resume school on Tuesday. And if we had that to do over again, we may have canceled school on Tuesday. If I had certainly had that to do over again, because when kids are walking home from school, and you can see that smoke plume. Now, this is Deer Park Junior High. This is one of our schools. It's in the northern section. That Tuesday morning, I went to, we have a school called Sanderson Elementary that is the northernmost school in the district. It's an elementary campus. I was over there at 7 o'clock in the morning when arrival. And when you could step around the corner of the school and see the flames and the smoke, I'm thinking to myself, this probably was not the best decision. But we made that decision based on evidence, okay? Hard evidence. Evidence that there was no issues with air quality, that everything was pushing the smoke to the west, but we did not take into consideration the psychological impact it had on families. When you can see that smoke and you can see the fire, as much as the media was covering it, that's one issue that we did not take into consideration. And when we have school that day, typically we have, I had an employee pull this the other day, typically we have about 95% attendance, 95.6. Well, that day, district-wide, we had 77% attendance. So we had over 2,500 kids absent that day of the district with 12,500. I'm not sure how much teaching took place. I'm not sure really, I didn't pull the information as to how many employees. We had a lot of employees who were absent that day, a lot of substitutes. So that's one thing we did not take into consideration when we had school on that Tuesday was what I would say the psychological impact. All of the evidence supported the fact that the kids would have been safe at school, that kids were safe at school. And when you drove around the community, kids are out playing in the parks. On the days that we canceled school, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, they're having baseball practice, everything else. But heaven forbid that you try to have school, because you're going to catch all kinds of grief on what Mr. White called the other day anti-social media. I can promise you. Those are people, the complainers are the ones that are most vocal. I'm sure we all know that. And those are the people that are going to show up at the school board meeting, are going to get on social media and just roast you for having school, but they also might be the one that sends their son outside to play in the park or go to baseball practice. But you better not be making your kid go to school that day. So, I don't think we put our kids in danger. I'm certain of that because there was no unfavorable air, there was no impact to our school district. But there was that, once again, that psychological issue of seeing that smoke plume and all that. And, the media was relentless on covering that. And ITC did not do themselves too many favors initially on those news briefings, and it was just not a positive outcome for them, I can promise you. So, once again, we decided that evening to cancel school, and we really canceled school for the rest of the week. One of the pictures here, this one, at nighttime, it was much more dramatic when you could see the flames. But finally, towards the end of the week, they started getting the fire put out. And if you drove by today, that's what you would see. All of those tanks were burned. These two right here were the only two that didn't burned completely, and I think part of the reason is because the product was pumped out of time. But all of those tanks were burning. That road, you know, that road that goes to Montana, Battleground Road, it stayed closed for quite some time, even after the fire, even after, market increase. Yes, it was closed for a month. So that was a big impact on those people up and down that road. So right by there, certainly that's what you would see. But I would take away, and these things I stole from Mr. White, any of you that went to the safety summit that we had at Region 4 the other day, or last week, I guess it was. This is kind of repetitive for you, but these would be our takeaways from that. Once again, communication is the key. I'll offer up to you that communicate early, communicate often. During that week, we sent out 10 different Skylarks. We use Skyward and how we communicate with our parents through email, a text message to Skylark. We sent out 10 different Skylarks to our parents. And Mr. White made that statement the other day. We even sent out Skylarks telling people what we were not going to do as opposed to what we were doing. So communication is the key. Know your sources of information. That's kind of what I touched on earlier. Have those relationships with the mayor, the emergency management, whoever you deal with in that municipality that your school works in or your school resides in. Make sure you know those sources of information. You have those relationships with those folks so that they can help you with that. And once again, collaboration, depending on your friends, like I talked about in the report. We even communicate with Pasadena. Pasadena closed several days that week too, so it's always nice to have that partner in crime, somebody that can help you fade the heat if you're taking it, but it does make a big difference. And when you're dealing with school closures, whether it be an ice closure or a flooding event or something like this, it's nice to have those partners. And then lastly, that psychological impact. I've said that several times over and over. That was big. One of the things we did do well, and we made a copy of this from some other district, but prior to that Saturday and Sunday prior to resuming school again Monday, you know, kids had basically 2 spring breaks for the most part. Prior to resuming school that Monday, a couple things we did wisely is we advertised to the parents, and we did this, is that we changed all of our AC filters out. We put our maintenance department to work that weekend, got overtime, changed out all of our AC filters, and washed and cleaned all of our playground equipment. Whether we needed to do that or not, whether that was really an issue for us, it made the parents, it kind of helped alleviate some of their concerns of some of the things that we did prior to school resuming. Certainly had our maintenance department walking the school grounds and all that, but those are some things that we tried to do. And then the last thing we did on that Monday when school did resume, we had our communications department go to most of our campuses and do short little videos and put together a video of kids actually back at school, enjoying the day, enjoying having a good time, going to recess, all those things. There was even some consideration of canceling recess that day, but we decided to go ahead and go outside. There was no reason why we shouldn't, and we didn't want to present that same issue that we've been having. But we highlighted a little video of, back to school and appreciative of everybody. So those are some things that we did. I hope that helps you in the future. The Crosby lady that was going to speak, one of the questions I had for her, and some of you might be able to help me with this, but when you do have a shelter in place, talk about, somebody raise their hand and help me out with this, but when you have a shelter in place at your campus that you've experienced before, how are you handling parents that come up there knocking on the door that want their kid? Signs on the door, right? And trying to, and that's something that I'm looking at differently because, you don't want 100 parents standing out there knocking on the door telling you, videoing, and you're not letting them get their kids. So I think that I'm going to try to make sure that I communicate that better up front prior to those events, because that would not play very well either. A mad mother up at the door, knocking on the door. You've got the air handler shut down. You've got the doors locked. Now what are you going to do when there's 20 or 30 parents? It only takes 1 or 2 to get on the media. You don't need 100 of them, and you won't let their kids go out. Somebody experienced that before?
Yeah, we experienced it the first time during this shutdown.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do going forward is the standard protocol that describes what each, lockdown, lock-in,
Sure.
we're putting that in the parent handbook and going over the certain appointments with the parents. They give them an expectation of what the children are gonna do at school and what we expect of them as their child's first teachers. We're including that in those commitment agreements. And we're also posting them at the doors, every classroom, the make entrance, the back entrance, and some of them will try to sneak around to get their child. So we're making sure that we have it everywhere and that they know when we send out, because we use school messenger.
Okay.
When we send that out with that verbiage, they know what it is and we will send it back to their handbook.
And I think that's a great way to do it, because you gotta get that out ahead of time. I suspect that a lot of the kids who were absent that day, Tuesday, we did have school, it was for that reason, because I think some parents were afraid that if we did go to shelter in place, we were not gonna let them have their kids. So they just chose to keep their kids at home that day. They didn't want their kids at school. What they don't realize is that school is probably a safer place than their home, but they want their babies around them, and I understand that from a parent's perspective.
Stephen, another thing, one of the reasons in this consideration of canceling school, there was a time period in there where we thought the weather might change a little bit and the wind started blowing back.
Absolutely.
We didn't want to get those kids in school before we didn't. And then have to keep them in school.
Keep them overnight, yeah.
And not really, because it does have to do an emergency shelter in place. And speaking of shelter in place, years ago we had another incident down on 146. And we had just a single school shelter in place. And we don't let anybody in. News media with a camera went around and came through the kitchen door and got in our school. And so that's not everything happening.
So we can get them a ride out of there and back in a fancy black and white car?
That was all there. But one other thing, the next week after it was all over with, and we were still doing all this air monitoring and everything, but we were back in school. And I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience. When we have people come into our administration building, they have to wrap their in just like they do at school. We had a young man, long hair, shorts, come in, refused to give his name, refused to give any identification, and but wanted to talk to the superintendent, and refused to leave. And he was from Freedom Press, and he wanted to know why we weren't doing our own heritage. When everyone, the county was doing it, all of it, but that he was real adamant about coming into our building. I escorted him out and told him I'd talk to him outside, but I wasn't going to let him in the building.
You get some unreasonable requests. I had a few parents call me and ask why we were not cleaning the entire duct system in the school district. Can you imagine how long that would take? Yeah, what the price of that would be. We probably may not finish school if we waited to do that. So, you have to deal with some of those folks when you take some of those phone calls. But, like I said, these are some things that we learned, and I think being proactive about advertising what you're going to do in these kind of events ahead of time will prevent maybe some of those issues. And the last thing I will say is make sure you have enough minutes built in your calendar that when you do have to cancel school, you don't have to make it up. Okay? Because that worked out for us, I can promise you. When you're devising the calendar, build yourself some extra days in there. Whether it be you have to come to school 5 minutes earlier, that makes a big difference. Because one of our makeup days was Good Friday, and it would have been the attendance would have been worse than 77%. I can promise you. Fortunately, we didn't have to use that makeup day because we had enough days built into our calendar, and we got some relief from the commissioner. Any questions that I can try to answer? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Well, we want to make sure that we gave that time to you guys to discuss anything that might impact your district. It's a concern for us all, because lessons learned internally are things that help you prepare for something that might happen in your district, and also provide support. One of the things when I was going out and talking with you guys at the end of the year during our client relations meeting, found out a lot about LAPCs that were being run. I think actually Brian has been meeting with them once. Can you talk about that? Give some information on that? Thank you. He's packing up, and I'm not.
I meet with two different LAPCs from jurisdictions in my school district, Galena Park LAPC and Marchell LAPC, and we meet once a month, and we, all the different jurisdictions when it comes to law enforcement, first responders, plus all the industries in the area, industries to be exact, and we talk about everything, and building those relationships within LAPC comes in handy, like you mentioned, when you want to get help from somebody. It's not like a first time meeting somebody, because we meet once per month.
And that came up several times as far as not only just with meeting with the districts, but when I started investigating more of our Houston area LAPC and then the different ones around there, they are wanting districts to embrace them and talk to them, because they have information that they can share. Understanding what hazards you might need to be more aware of in your area as you expand your EOPs, make sure that they are tight, since all this regulation is coming down and mandates are coming down. People are looking for everything that's regarding, we understand that. And they have money. Okay, so that's definitely a relationship that we're going to have fostered through HCDE and whatever else might help. Yes.
So Fort LAPC meets in one of our facilities, our support facility.
Okay.
And by coincidence, Harris County was doing a safety audit at that building one day when they were meeting, and all these people with guns and everything were walking into the building, because law enforcement, anyway, it's quite a shock to the auditor.
See all the guns that we still. But I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your input. Feedback we're always looking for. On your agenda, there is a QR code and the URLs there as well. As far as the survey, to let us know what the meeting was for you today, but then more importantly, what can we provide in the future. The future is going to be bright and busy, it seems like, with everything that's coming out. And we just need to put on our boots and work. I may join Mr. Gurley with the Medicare. That's all I was like. Lucky guy. But really, I really appreciate everything that you do for us to support our center, and we hope that we're providing you as much as you need, and if we're not, let us know. Always open for that. So that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.